The City Improvement District is a entity that's formed from the property owners with vested interest in a defined area. And the order is obviously to look at the top-up levels of services. So it's never to take away or replace, but to just do a added value type of component with street sweeping, visible policing, that type of thing. And then the facilitation role between property owners, homeowners, and to try and improve the area in their general well-being, which would be in the likes of improved pavements, paving, planting of trees, and just create that facilitation role. And we play a big part in that. And that's why SIDS came about very much out of Mayor Giuliani, how he turned around New York some years ago. And the SIDS came about from that as a model adapted for the South African use, and more in particular Cape Town. And from that, we've taken that model and modified it somewhat to suit our type of environment. And yeah, especially in Greenpoint, we started just over 12 years, or we're in our 12th year now in June 2001. And we've come a long way in the sense of assisting the services from the city and then providing the top-up level of services. So where they have sort of, in a sense, taken on the extra responsibility of providing services in all the areas now, as they have been doing, we've obviously tried to fill a gap there to try and assist them, and that's where the top-up level of services.
And how do you determine where that gap is?
It's not to say it's quite clearly evident when you go outside, but many years ago, if you go back 12 years to this area in particular, the area was sort of on the urban regeneration in the sense of urban sprawl, and people were moving out, people were sort of not maintaining the areas to the degree of what an individual might do, or your neighbour, etc. So what has happened is the street sweeping was only done on a twice a week system, the collection of refuse and that one. What we did is looked at that and said, okay, fine, as people pay for a service, then the service should be of a high standard. And that's where we identified various, and the main components was street sweeping, that would be your street refuse. This is not your personal refuse out of businesses or homes, and visible policing, where the active deployment of members in uniform is very much the thing that people also look at and feel a sense of safety in that. And that you have to add the two, and we call it a crime and grime. The two do work hand in hand, and people forget that. People want to deal with crime on one side and grime on the other, but they work hand in hand. And it's a strong partnership with the City of Cape Town in going forward in the type of services that we provide.
And what sort of collaboration is there between the city and the Improvement District?
I think that Marcus touched on the idea that there's a handover. We have certain basic levels of service that we maintain across the city. The city is a large and sprawling entity, and you have to ensure equitable services everywhere in the city. That does mean that you don't necessarily get the quality of services in those areas where it is significant. And in this area, some years ago, you had a situation where, as Mark correctly says, 12, 15 years ago, where it was starting to become very decayed. When you look outside you and you walk around now, it didn't look anything like this. You can give property away in some parts of the Waterkant and Greenpoint. And that has changed very much. It's unrecognizable. While the city supplies basic services, they top up on the two basics, crime and grime, extra law enforcement personnel, or rent-a-cops, where the city has made a special program available where we allow the city improvement districts and other entities to contract additional law enforcement or traffic or metro police staff from us. We're the only city in the country that has that mechanism, and it works very well. We have about 150 rent-a-cops at this stage across the city. And then the rest of the focus is pretty much your broken windows philosophy. It's to make sure that the city is helping focus on those small things which in a larger city gets lost. It falls between the cracks. It's the broken windows, the street light that is out. It's the difference between a street light being out for a day and a street light being out for a week. And the SID precinct manager has his patrol. He has to make sure that he attends to all of those issues and is making those adjustments, rendering a service where council is failing, holding us to account. So it's also an accountability mechanism to make sure that we comply with that basic level of services that we've indicated we will in terms of some service level agreement. And it goes further than that. The SIDS are also organizational hubs. So whilst they're rendering that first level of services, they become a valuable organizational spindle for planning redevelopment, for reinventing a community, because as Mark also indicated, shopping and retail patterns changed in South Africa. People were drawn and lured towards large malls with safe parking and enclosed, gated internal spaces. That meant that Main Street shopping suffered. So areas that are dependent on Main Street shopping, whether you're in Greenpoint or Athlone or Coburg Road or Voortrekker Road in Bellville, they've suffered at the hands of the larger shopping centres and the changing retail patterns. They've had to reinvent themselves. They have to develop a different purpose that they serve, whether it's passing trade on the way towards a public transport interchange or as a node or hub for government business. And each of them has to go through that exercise, and the cities become valuable organisers and coordinators of that collective business community's activities, who often fail to be able to coordinate if they do so on a piecemeal basis.
Now, one of the main retail shopping centres in Greenpoint is the Cape Quarter. And I've seen a large turnaround in the amount of shops there. There are a lot of open shops there at the moment. What is the reason for that?
Ashlea, I mean, yes, very much so. The Cape Quarter came about just over 2 years ago. It's now in its third year. The owners of the shopping centre, they were very successful in the couple of the developments that they have done prior to Cape Quarter. It's one of the biggest they've sort of managed to take on. And if you look at their type of tenant mix, they're very selective, and they've kept to that type of formula. And they don't flood a centre immediately. What they do is they slowly sort of wean into more and more sort of tenants as they fill in, and they find that as it develops, they don't try and do duplication of tenancies and that type of thing. So you'll find that yes, when they opened up, they weren't fully let. They were partially sort of a percentage. I can't give it offhand, and then slowly they've put in new, and then they've also found that certain of the tenants didn't quite work in the area that it's servicing. And you'll find that they would, at the terminate or at the end of their lease, they would then obviously opt out and not renew. And through also the change of the demographics of the area, you would find that there would be a different need or requirement coming out of the centre itself. And then what would happen is that type of tenant, which was never thought of initially, would be then in line to come in. And you can see now a big change. And they've also the planning. You can see they've redone the certain areas to create more of an open sort of courtyard, which is what the Cape Quarter is referred to as the courtyard, as against the old one, the piazza. And you can see a nice tenant mix. And they've created this Sunday market, which is now on a Wednesday as well. And it's created a whole new sort of era for them, and it's working exceptionally well.
Do you feel that this investment was mainly for the World Cup?
No, you know, if you look at the planning, and it takes quite some time to sort of from getting it out of the ground to completion. That's several years in the making, and you'll find that yes, I mean, although 2010 came about, there were 6 or 7 years ahead of it in planning. The centre was already on the cards to coincide, obviously, as it was leading up to 2010. It just coincidentally opened just ahead of in November, I think, of 2009, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
I mean, I can corroborate that this community is an area with very dense heritage and title deed restrictions and other complex planning issues. So there was a protracted period of negotiation with residents' associations and the council around the heritage aspects of a large-scale development like that.
Now, using Greenpoint as an example, there's obviously been a lot of investment in the area. We've seen the whole area turn around completely. What are some of the projects that have really stood out and been very successful? In
sort of over the 12-year period, the larger developments, you know, this area was very much, you've got a combination of a conservation area being the Waterkant, and then sort of on its fringe, which is the lower part of Greenpoint towards Somerset Road, etc. It's a light industrial sort of zoned area. So in the years that have been here, we've had sort of auto electricians, we've had panel beating shops, we've had leather shops, you know, all related to the auto industry. And over time, the first big sort of trigger, which started some time ago, was the Waterkant Centre, which is the currently where Harley Davidson and Kubana is. That was sort of the initial big building type that we hadn't seen for quite some time in the area. Everything was sort of more lower cap, 2, 3 floor, 4 floor type of height buildings. That sort of kicked off, it got it going, and then when that sort of settled down, the Harbour Edge development on the foreshore, more just short of the Helen Suzman Western, as everyone, the unfinished highway, as referred to previously as the Western Boulevard. They did a fantastic building there, and that sort of got the catalyst going. And you've seen now sporadically, and the building you're actually in now, 39 on Hudson, is a phenomenal building by their owner Gerald Phillips, and they too sort of not piggybacked on it, but had these ideas as the sort of the area settled down, and very much a strong component of the management from the city and SIDS and Greenpoint. People wanted to be part of it. They wanted to be part of this not new area, it's always been around, but it's a hive of activity, and you start looking at the component in what's here. The specialists, you've got architectural, it's quite a hub of that, interior design, hub of that, and then you'll see all the businesses on retail are very much linked to that. You know, the nice shops that you've got, interior design, you know, that like private collection, you know, I can rattle them all off, but it's such a nice trend. So people get into sort of meander around the area, and they can come and, you know, fit a kit out their house or their home or their offices and come and meet the architects or the interior design. And this is the hub at what has become. It's a very much sought after, and we run it 24 hours because the area is deemed to be very much prominent in the gay community. That's, you know, it has all the clubs and bars and etc. And that's been the catalyst very much of a very sought after niche area, and that's spilt over, and everyone now supports that. And it's grown drastically and rapidly over the period of time. So
that investment has really come out of making a niche out of Greenpoint.
Absolutely.
It has a very distinct niche market and a very distinct feel. It has played host to more film shoots and film production activities than just about any other community, perhaps with the exception of the Boerkaap adjacent to it. So a great deal of film production goes on here, as the residents often remind us, by way of motivating for increased expenditure on maintenance and upgrades. I think also they benefited tremendously from being a part of the fan walk for the World Cup. A very large amount of money spent by council on the upgrade of those public walkways, the expropriation of land to create that, where pieces of private property had to be expropriated to create or facilitate the extra walkways. Significant investment in security, CCTV, new lighting, and urban redesign. So the area has benefited from being well located, but also from creating a particular market that has seen it become very, very popularized. The density in itself has grown tremendously over the last few years, very much in line with the city's municipal spatial development framework as an area desirable for such density.
Alderman Smith, where should we expect to see the next wave of gentrification in Cape Town?
You're already seeing it along Woodstock down towards Salt River. There have been a variety of upmarket, very attractive developments on an area that previously was also very industrial, semi-industrial, from the Bromwell to the Biscuit Mill. There are a number of new developments all the time, and that's very encouraging. Already it's so that if you didn't buy there 10 years ago, it is too late to try and acquire that property. I think areas that will now gentrify also, that will pick up quite nicely, is the Voortrekker Road corridor. A great deal of energy is being spent on there. The Mayor's Urban Regeneration Campaign is about to roll out quite a bit of resources, planning approvals, plan substitutions in that area. And then my guess is, as a future gentrification area, would be the Brooklyn area, well located, close to council, midway between Century City and the CBD, close to work opportunities, and currently suppressed by a couple of urban blight factors, which will be starting to come right. So I think that is a future area for investment.